Hello boys and girls, how are you today? This is JC once again, and today I bring you another yo-yo review. And today we are doing Yoyofactory, and not just one, but four Yoyofactory yo-yos. And why am I grouping these four together? Sure, they're all Yoyofactory, but also because they are all kind of older designs. They range somewhere between, I think, maybe 3 to 7 years old. And because of that, they are actually quite cheap. They can be found, I mean, they're out of stock at retail, but on the secondary market, most of these can be found for, I think, $30 to $50, which can be an excellent deal for a bimetal if these are able to keep up with today's requirements. So that's what we're going to find out today. So the first one I will talk about is the Nightmare, the Yoyofactory Nightmare. I really like the design of the yo-yo. Now this was the first yo-yo I bought after a long hiatus. I bought this, I think, in 2015 when it was released. And if you've played yo-yo during 2005 to 2010, that period, I think you'll know why this shape really appeals to me. This is basically a yo-yo gem made by Yoyofactory. Like, this is like the speeder or the Night Moves profile. See, now thinking back, maybe even the name Nightmare is a callback to Night Moves. And I just like the design overall. It looks simple but sweet. And again, it's hard to say no to this V wall with thin steel rims kind of profile. It's just so classic. Now, if we play with this yo-yo, you will notice that this yo-yo, it's got a weird, not weird, I say it's got a unique feel when you hit the string with it. It's kind of oddly bouncy on the string, no matter what string I use. And that's actually, I'm a huge fan of that. It just feels nice for the yo-yo to give you a feedback like that. And seeing the shape, you would expect it to be super fast, and by all means it's not slow, but it's not like the fastest yo-yo. And it's because these metal rims, they are actually quite hefty, even though they look thin. And the Nightmare is more of an all-rounder to me because it does kind of everything reasonably well. Now the design is definitely just a little bit outdated, because if you compare it to like the shutter, you can see that the Nightmare is narrower by not by a lot, but by a bit. And even the shutter nowadays is probably smaller than average, because yo-yos are just getting bigger and bigger nowadays. So I'm sure that if the Nightmare would be designed today, it would be just a little bit wider. But in terms of performance, I have no complaints. It does everything fine. The only problem with this is I think the binds are a little bit loose. Yeah, for some reason it just doesn't bind quite as well as a lot of the other yo-yos. But aside from that, I love playing with this yo-yo because it's just the feel on the string is, I think, is kind of unique. But it sure has a lot to do with nostalgia as well. Yeah, that's the Nightmare. Sure, it might be a bit outdated, but it's still an excellent yo-yo. All right, next we have the Space Cadet. Space Cadet. Now, Yoyofactory is actually really creative with their shapes. I think they're one of the most creative companies. And Space Cadet it does look pretty unique. It's like a almost like a shutter edge, right? Sure, this was before edge, but nowadays, if you look back, it's like a cross between shutter and the edge. And at the time, I considered it to be more like a bimetal shutter because the profile is not identical. Sure, there are some cuts here that are different, but it's similar enough. And does it perform like a bimetal shutter? I think not quite, because the shutter is more, I think it's more stable. Meanwhile, the Space Cadet is just a bit faster. And I'm not sure if placing the metal rings here, just moving them more towards the center accomplishes much, because I think the yo-yo does lose some stability, but I guess it becomes more, how do you say it, more nimble, as in that on the string, if there's a sudden change in direction, if there's just a hop or short tricks that require the yo-yo bouncing around within a short kind of area, I think moving the weight rings closer to the center does make the yo-yo better at that, but I'm not sure. But with that said, the Space Cadet is what I just described. It's not fast, but it's quick. So in that sense, it kind of compares well to the shutter. But I do think it's not quite as stable as I like it to be, especially for a bimetal yo-yo. So if I'm a bit more, how do you say, if I'm a bit more violent with the yo-yo, if I do these big hops, the Space Cadet can't always handle everything perfectly. So the Space Cadet, I think, is a nice yo-yo, but I do think there are better options nowadays. And I'm not even sure if it's much better than the Shutter. Might be a little bit, but I would recommend maybe looking at something else within this price range. But again, keep in mind that this might have a lot to do with personal preference. So, and this did retail at $100. So getting one for $30 to $50 is still an excellent deal if you like the shape. Next up, we have the Turntable 2.0. And this is probably my favorite yo-yo in the bunch, spoiler alert, because, well, look at the design, it's so unique, right? It's so cool. And with the, I don't know how they do it, it's like this huge, super wide steel ring that wraps around, or wraps in on the inside wall of the yo-yo. It's so unique. And in terms of play, again, this is, I honestly, I expected this to be more of a kind of a novelty yo-yo just because of how it looks, right? It's like Yoyofactory is trying to make something just as unique as possible rather than a serious performer. But turns out it is both. The shape is, I'm not sure what to compare it to, but it's a very comfortable shape that a lot of companies use nowadays. The one I have with me right now is the Omnitron from C3, as you can see. But yeah, a lot of companies have yo-yos with this shape, like the Caribou Lodge Igloo, and also the Duncan, what's it called? Duncan Turney. Oh, I have it. Yeah, it's right here. Duncan Turney. But out of all the yo-yos I mentioned above, I think Turntable is my favorite because it's actually big and wide. Compare this to the Nightmare. Right, it's wider, it's bigger, and it's just more powerful. It's just more powerful yo-yo, even than the C3 Omnitron. I think this is like a Omnitron plus in terms of performance because it's, I don't know how they do it, but it feels so fast on the string, but meanwhile it's also extremely stable and it's able to handle pretty much everything. And it's great for finger spin as well. So if this is one of the yo-yos that if it gets released this year or even next year, I would feel like, oh, what a great new yo-yo. So this is, I highly recommend the Turntable 2.0 for the unique design, for the extremely good performance. It's just a cool yo-yo. And this is also, I think, pretty cheap. It retailed for, oh, this is also the highest retail at $110. But nowadays it can be found for less than half that, I think. So definitely try this yo-yo. That's the Turntable. And lastly, we have the Alta. Now this one is the cheapest yo-yo at retail. This retailed for $75. But nowadays, again, it can be found from $30 to $50. And at first, if you look at the profile, it kind of looks like the Edge Beyond, doesn't it? Because the wide steel rims, the wide edgy steel rims with the kind of edgy profile. But if you compare it to the actual Edge Beyond, you will notice they're pretty different. They are pretty different. Now the Alta is much taller and slimmer. And they don't really play that similarly, so I will not compare this to the Edge Beyond. Because the Alta is actually, it feels a bit awkward. I don't know why, like the word I can think of is awkward on the string and in your hand. And when you throw the yo-yo down on your first throw, it feels like there's almost a delay. And when you land it onto the string, the yo-yo is stable, it is powerful, but just something feels a little bit strange. I think it partly has to do with the angle of the steel weight rings. Like the Edge Beyond, the steel weight rings are a little bit too flat. Sure, there's a slight V, but they are, I think, a bit too flat, so that if the yo-yo is slightly, you see it's slightly tilted or off the desired plane, your string is going to kind of land on these rims and then land into the gap. Sure, I'm not sure if it affects much, but it definitely, you can feel. And this does affect horizontal, because at horizontal it's much harder to control the yo-yo to be 100% parallel to your direction of movement. So sometimes you might even land onto the edge and it will fall off. Although, see, I'll bring back the Edge Beyond again. The Edge, I think this problem is a bit more pronounced because these are even flatter than the Alta, but I can definitely feel that with the Alta. Now the Yo-yo it feels a bit sluggish sometimes, but if you want to speed up, it can totally speed up. And again, I feel like this is like personal bias now because it can do pretty much everything fine, but I just don't like how it feels on the string. It just feels awkward, But definitely this is something, if you can pick up for $30, $40, I would recommend, especially if you've tried it and you enjoy the Yo-yo, because in terms of like raw stats, in terms of performance, like spin time, stability, there's not much to complain about. So yeah, I definitely think this might be a good Yo-yo for you if you don't mind how it kind of the unique feeling this Yo-yo brings. So we have the Nightmare, we have the Space Cadet, we have the Turntable 2, and we have the Alta. And all of these I think are pretty good choices. Pretty good choices for, especially considering their price. And out of the four, I think this one, the Turntable 2.0, is my favorite, and I would highly recommend that you try one if you have the opportunity. And that's all. Thank you.